London, 1803. The chandeliers of Almack's assembly rooms cast their golden glow upon the cream of London society. Yet in a shadowed alcove near the refreshment table, Evangeline Beaumont stood alone, a silent sentinel in her modest lavender gown. At 8 and 20, she observed her three radiant younger sisters, Felicity, Lydia, and Iris, commanding attention at the ballroom's center, the undisputed diamonds of the season. "Your sisters have outdone themselves tonight," came a familiar voice, cutting through Evangeline's reverie. She turned to find Aunt Beatrice, her father's cousin and confidant, sipping punch beside her. "Indeed, Felicity appears to have captivated Lord Alcott entirely. And to think your father was near destitute just 3 seasons ago." Aunt Beatrice's eyes narrowed. One might wonder how he managed such a remarkable recovery. Evangeline's fingers tightened around her fan. Few knew the truth. It was her inheritance, the money left by her maternal grandmother, that had funded her sisters' seasons and secured their futures. Her own prospects had been the sacrifice. "Providence has been kind to us," Evangeline replied diplomatically. "Providence indeed," Aunt Beatrice sniffed, "though I wonder if Providence will be equally generous when the creditors come calling again. Your father's investments in the West Indies are failing, my dear. Whispers have already begun." A cold dread settled in Evangeline's stomach. The money was gone, then. All of it. She had nothing more to give. "I see you understand," Aunt Beatrice continued. "The Beaumont name hangs by a thread. One scandal, one whisper of insolvency, and all your sacrifices for your sisters will have been for naught." Across the room, Evangeline caught sight of her father, Viscount Beaumont, his face flushed with wine, as he gestured animatedly to a group of gentlemen. At 53, he retained the handsome features that had once made him the catch of his season, though years of excess had taken their toll. Since her mother's death a decade ago, he had sought solace in gambling and ill-advised investments, each more disastrous than the last. "I shall speak with father," Evangeline said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. "Perhaps there is something to be done." Aunt Beatrice's laugh held no humor. "My dear girl, what can you possibly do that you haven't already? You've given everything." The orchestra struck up a new melody, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. A hush fell over the assembly as a tall figure appeared at the entrance to the ballroom. "The Duke of Blackwood," announced the footman, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Lord Alistair Blackwood, the 5th Duke of Blackwood, stood framed in the doorway, his expression as cold and remote as his reputation suggested. At 33, he commanded attention not merely for his title, one of the oldest and most powerful in England, but for the formidable presence he brought with him. His dark hair was cut fashionably close, accentuating the sharp planes of his face and the penetrating intensity of his gray eyes. "Well," murmured Aunt Beatrice, suddenly alert, "this is unexpected. His Grace rarely graces these gatherings with his presence." Evangeline observed the ripple of excitement that spread through the room. Mothers with eligible daughters straightened imperceptibly. Young ladies adjusted their curls and practiced their most becoming smiles. "I heard he's finally seeking a bride," whispered a young woman nearby. "Lady Seraphina Sterling is said to be the front-runner." "Of course she is," replied her companion. "A duke doesn't marry just anyone." Evangeline watched as the duke moved through the crowd, acknowledging greetings with brief nods, but engaging with no one. There was something distant in his manner, as though an invisible barrier separated him from the rest of humanity. "Your father is about to make a grave mistake," Aunt Beatrice said suddenly, nodding toward where Viscount Beaumont was weaving his way toward the Duke, his gait unsteady. Evangeline's heart sank. "Excuse me, Aunt Beatrice." She moved quickly, intercepting her father before he could reach the Duke. "Father," she said quietly, taking his arm, "perhaps you might introduce me to Lady Durham. I've been hoping to discuss her charitable work." "Not now, Evangeline," he slurred, attempting to shake off her hand. "Can't you see? Blackwood is here. This is our opportunity." "Father, please." "Viscount Beaumont," came a deep voice, and Evangeline found herself looking up into the impassive face of the Duke of Blackwood himself. "I was hoping for a word." "Your Grace!" Her father's face lit with undisguised eagerness. "What an honor! May I present my eldest daughter, Miss Evangeline Beaumont?" The Duke's gaze shifted to Evangeline, and she felt a curious sensation, as though those gray eyes could see through every defense she had ever constructed. "Miss Beaumont," he offered a shallow bow. "Your Grace," she curtsied, keeping her eyes downcast as propriety demanded. "I understand you manage your father's household," he continued, surprising her with this knowledge. "I do, Your Grace, and quite capably from what I hear." Before Evangeline could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Lady Seraphina Sterling had arrived, resplendent in crimson silk, that set off her dark hair and fair complexion to perfection. At 26, the widowed countess was considered the most beautiful woman in London, her every appearance a carefully orchestrated triumph. "Ah, there she is," murmured Viscount Beaumont. "The woman everyone expects you to marry, Your Grace." If the Duke was offended by this impropriety, he gave no sign. "Expectations," he said coolly, "are rarely of interest to me, Viscount." His eyes returned to Evangeline, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Beaumont, I should like to call on you tomorrow. There is a matter I wish to discuss." Evangeline stared at him in undisguised shock. "With me, Your Grace." "Indeed." The faintest suggestion of amusement touched his lips. 3:00. "I trust that will be convenient." Without waiting for her response, he bowed again and moved away, leaving Evangeline and her father in stunned silence. "What in heaven's name was that about?" her father demanded once he recovered his voice. Evangeline shook her head slowly. "I have no idea." But as she watched the Duke's tall figure retreating through the crowd, a strange premonition swept through her. Tomorrow, she sensed, would change everything. The drawing-room of Beaumont House had never seemed so small as when the Duke of Blackwood stood within it. His broad shoulders and commanding height seemed to shrink the faded grandeur of what had once been an impressive town residence, highlighting the worn spots on the carpet and the slight discoloration of the once elegant wallpaper. Evangeline sat perched on the edge of the settee, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Across from her, the Duke occupied a wing-back chair, regarding her with that same penetrating gaze that had unsettled her the night before. "You must be wondering why I've come," he said finally. "I confess I am curious, Your Grace." Evangeline was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I'll be direct, Miss Beaumont. I require a wife." Evangeline blinked. "I see." "No, I don't believe you do." A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "I require a specific type of wife. One who understands discretion and duty. One who can manage a household without drama or excessive demands on my time. One who has no illusions about romance." He leaned forward slightly. "I've observed you, Miss Beaumont. You've sacrificed your own prospects to secure your sister's futures. You've managed your father's household through increasingly difficult circumstances. You are practical, discreet, and I suspect harboring no particular illusions about the nature of marriage among our class." Evangeline felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. "Your Grace, surely. Lady Seraphina Sterling is precisely what I do not want." Alistair's tone hardened, his profile sharp against the afternoon light as he moved to the window. "A woman whose beauty is matched only by her ambition, who would view our marriage as a stepping stone to social domination." Evangeline felt a chill. The Duke was not merely seeking a wife, but a specific counterpoint to a past experience. "I have responsibilities that require my full attention, Miss Beaumont. Estates to manage, parliamentary matters, business interests. I need a partner who understands that my focus must remain on these duties. One who will not add further complications to an already demanding life." "And you believe I might be that partner?" Evangeline couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Alistair turned back to her, his gaze unwavering. "I do. There are rumors about your family's financial situation. I know your father has made unwise investments, that his creditors are circling, that without intervention, the Beaumont name will be disgraced within months." Evangeline felt a flush of heat rise in her cheeks. He seemed remarkably well informed about their most private affairs, a chilling thought. Your Grace, how can you possibly possess such intimate knowledge? She managed, her voice tight. Information is valuable, Miss Beaumont. I make it my business to be well informed. Alistair returned to his seat, his expression impassive. I offer you a straightforward arrangement. As my Duchess, you would have the means to clear your family's debts and secure their future. Your sisters' positions in society would be unassailable. Your father would be protected from his worst tendencies. Evangeline listened, her mind reeling at the sheer magnitude of the offer. In return, you would manage my households, attend functions when required, present a united and dignified front to society. You would be mistress of Blackwood Manor, my principal seat in Kent, as well as my other properties. You would want for nothing material. Evangeline studied him, searching for some hint of his true motivations beyond practicality. Forgive my impertinence, Your Grace, but why me? Surely there are dozens of young ladies of good family who would accept such an arrangement gladly. Something flickered in his gray eyes, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. There are rumors about me as well, Miss Beaumont. Some true, some fabricated. A suitable marriage would put many of them to rest. And suddenly she did see. He sought not a partner in the traditional sense, but a shield. A convenient wife, respectable but not ambitious, would protect him from whatever whispers followed him. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement, he said, rising again, his decision apparently made. I don't require an immediate answer. Take 24 hours to consider my offer. I'll return tomorrow at the same time. Without another word, he bowed curtly and departed, leaving Evangeline motionless on the settee. Her mind raced, grappling with the colossal weight of his proposition. The silence of the drawing-room pressed in on her, amplifying the enormity of what she had just been offered. The Duke's offer was both salvation and prison, financial security for her family, a guarantee against ruin and scandal. But at what personal cost? A lifetime bound to a man who viewed marriage as a business transaction, who had stated plainly that his heart was not part of the bargain. He sought a manager, a figurehead, a shield, not a wife in the sense of shared intimacy or affection. Yet what choice did she truly have? Aunt Beatrice had spoken truly. The Beaumont name stood on the edge of ruin. Evangeline had already sacrificed her youth, her dreams of painting, to her family's needs. Was this final, ultimate sacrifice so different from all the others? Her own prospects had always been secondary, non-existent even. It seemed her fate was simply to serve. When her father burst into the drawing-room an hour later, his expression wild with excitement, she already knew what her answer must be. "Is it true?" he demanded, nearly vibrating with nervous energy. "Blackwood has offered for you?" "Yes," Evangeline replied quietly. "Though how you've heard of it already, I cannot imagine. His man of business called on me directly after he left here." Her father paced the room. "Evangeline, do you understand what this means? We are saved, all of us. A duke, by heaven, and not just any duke, Blackwood." "He knows about our financial situation," she said, her voice flat. "That's why he's offering." Her father waved this away impatiently. "What does it matter why? The result is the same." "It matters to me," Evangeline said, rising to her feet. "He doesn't want love, Father. He wants convenience." "Love!" Her father barked a laugh, a harsh, humorless sound. "What has love to do with marriage? You're 28, Evangeline. Long past the age when you might expect romantic nonsense. Blackwood offers you position, wealth, security. Everything we thought beyond your reach." Evangeline turned away, staring out at the small, neglected garden behind their home. Once it had been her mother's pride, filled with roses and lavender. Now it lay untended, much like Evangeline's own dreams of a life beyond duty. "I haven't given him my answer yet," she said. "He returns tomorrow." Her father gripped her shoulders, turning her to face him, his eyes wide with a desperate fear she knew all too well. "Evangeline, listen to me. There is no choice to make. By next month, we will lose this house. Your sisters' marriages will be tainted by scandal. Everything you've sacrificed for will be destroyed." She saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear that had driven him to increasingly reckless gambles. How many times had she covered for him, made excuses, stretched their limited resources to maintain appearances? "I know," she said softly. "I know what must be done." The following afternoon, when Lord Alistair Blackwood returned, Evangeline was waiting. She had spent the intervening hours preparing herself, building walls around her heart, reminding herself that this was simply another duty to be fulfilled. "You've made your decision," he said, as soon as they were alone. "I have." Evangeline met his gaze steadily. "I accept your offer, your grace." Something that might have been relief, fleeting and quickly masked, crossed his face. "Alistair," he said, "if we are to be married, you should use my given name." "Alistair," she repeated, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. "This belonged to my mother," he said, opening it to reveal a magnificent emerald ring surrounded by diamonds, the Blackwood betrothal ring. As he slid it onto her finger, his hand brushed against hers, a brief electric contact that sent an unexpected shiver through Evangeline's body. The ring was heavy, its weight a physical reminder of the commitment she had just made. The journey to Blackwood Manor took the better part of a day, the Duke's luxurious traveling carriage winding through the rolling countryside of Kent. Evangeline, now the Duchess of Blackwood after a small but dignified wedding ceremony, watched the changing landscape from the window, acutely aware of her husband seated across from her. In the month since their engagement, she had seen Alistair only a handful of times, brief, formal encounters focused entirely on practical matters. The settlement had been beyond generous, their betrothal announcement met with astonishment by society, and the wedding itself conducted with quiet efficiency. Through it all, Alistair had remained polite but distant. Now, as husband and wife, they were alone together for the first time, and Evangeline found herself unexpectedly nervous. "We'll arrive before nightfall," Alistair said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for miles. "I've sent word ahead to ensure all is prepared." "I look forward to seeing Blackwood Manor," Evangeline replied, her voice steady despite her inner trepidation. "I understand it's quite beautiful." "It has been in my family for 10 generations." A note of genuine pride, rare and unexpected, entered his voice. "The east wing dates to Tudor times, though most of the current structure was built by my great-grandfather in the last century." "And you've lived there all your life?" Evangeline ventured. "Until I was sent to Eton at 10, yes." His expression closed again, the brief glimpse of warmth vanishing, hinting at some old wound that still pained him. Evangeline sensed there was more to the story, but their arrangement didn't include such intimacies. "Will we have guests immediately?" Evangeline asked instead, respecting his sudden reserve. "I should like to become familiar with the household first." Alistair's mouth curved in what might almost have been a smile, a fleeting softening of his severe features. "I anticipated as much." "We'll have a period of privacy before society descends upon us. Though my grandmother, the Grand Duchess Augusta, maintains a dower house on the estate, she will expect to meet you promptly." "I shall look forward to it," Evangeline said diplomatically. Alistair raised an eyebrow. "You may revise that opinion after meeting her." "My grandmother is formidable." The carriage crested a hill, and suddenly Blackwood Manor lay before them, its pale stone walls gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. Evangeline caught her breath. The house was magnificent, a perfect example of classical architecture, with symmetrical wings extending from a grand central block, topped by a pediment and dome. Extensive gardens stretched away on all sides, and beyond them a lake shimmered silver in the distance. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her awe undeniable. "Yes." Alistair was watching her reaction closely, a rare, genuine pleasure in his gray eyes. "It is." As they approached, Evangeline saw a long line of servants assembled on the steps to greet them. At their head stood a distinguished older man with silver hair and a dignified bearing. "Harrington," Alistair explained, "my butler. He has served the family since my father's time." The carriage drew to a halt, and a footman opened the door. Alistair descended first, then turned to offer his hand to Evangeline. As she stepped down, she was acutely conscious of the dozens of pairs of eyes upon her, evaluating their new mistress. Alistair kept her hand in his as they approached the waiting household. "May I present Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackwood," he said formally. Evangeline inclined her head graciously. "I am pleased to meet you all, and look forward to becoming acquainted with each of you." "Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Your Grace," Harrington said with a deep bow. "We are honored to serve you." The staff filed past, each being introduced in turn. Last came a pretty young woman who curtsied deeply. "Phillips will be your lady's maid," Alistair explained. "She comes highly recommended." "Thank you," Evangeline said, offering the girl a kind smile. "I'm sure we'll get along splendidly." Inside, the house was even more impressive than its exterior had suggested. Marble floors gleamed beneath their feet as Alistair led Evangeline through a succession of magnificent rooms. The grand salon with its gilt-framed portraits, the music room with a pianoforte that made Evangeline's fingers itch to play, the formal dining room that could easily seat 30. "Your rooms are in the west wing," Alistair said as they climbed the grand staircase. "I took the liberty of having them redecorated, but if they don't suit, you need only say the word." "I'm sure they'll be lovely," Evangeline replied, though in truth she couldn't imagine finding fault with anything in this palace that was now her home. The Duchess's chambers exceeded even her heightened expectations. A sitting room in soft blues and creams opened into a spacious bedchamber, dominated by a massive 4-poster bed draped in silk. Beyond lay a dressing room and a private bathing chamber fitted with modern conveniences that would have been unimaginable in her father's modest home. "Oh," she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "It's perfect." For the first time, Alistair looked genuinely pleased. "I'm glad you approve. My rooms adjoin yours," he added, gesturing to a door set into the far wall of the bedchamber. "Though, naturally, your privacy will be respected." Evangeline felt her cheeks warm at this reference to the most unspoken aspect of their arrangement. "Of course, thank you. Dinner will be at 8, he continued smoothly. "I thought you might wish to rest and refresh yourself after the journey." "Yes, that would be most welcome." Alistair bowed slightly. "Then I'll leave you to settle in. Phillips will attend you." After he departed, Evangeline sank onto a delicate chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her new position. She was a duchess, mistress of this grand estate, wife to one of the most powerful men in England, and yet she had never felt more alone. Phillips proved to be efficient and unobtrusive, helping Evangeline change from her traveling clothes into an evening gown of deep blue silk, one of the many new garments that had been commissioned for her trousseau. As the maid arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style, Evangeline studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman who gazed back at her looked different somehow, more poised, more elegant, every inch a duchess. But behind her eyes lurked the same Evangeline Beaumont, who had sacrificed everything for her family, who had never expected to marry at all, let alone to a duke. "You look beautiful, Your Grace," Phillips said softly. "Thank you, Phillips," Evangeline managed a smile. "I suppose I should go down. I wouldn't wish to keep His Grace waiting." She found Alistair in a smaller, more intimate dining room than the grand hall she had been shown earlier. He stood as she entered, his expression warming slightly as he took in her appearance. "The blue suits you," he said, coming forward to escort her to the table. "I hope your rooms are comfortable." "Very much so. Everyone has been most welcoming." Dinner was a quiet affair, the silence broken only by the soft movements of the footmen serving each course. Evangeline found herself studying her husband covertly as they ate. In the warm glow of the candles, Alistair's severe features softened slightly, revealing a handsomeness she had not fully appreciated before. He seemed less remote, more human. "You have questions," he said suddenly, catching her gaze, his voice calm. "Please ask them." Evangeline hesitated. "I was wondering about your daily routine, so that I might adapt mine accordingly." "Thoughtful of you." He set down his wine glass. "I rise early, often before dawn. I break my fast lightly, usually while reviewing correspondence in my study. Mornings are devoted to estate business, meetings with my steward, tenant farmers, and so forth. After luncheon I ride if the weather permits, or attend to other matters if it does not. And in the evenings, dinner as we are doing now." His mouth quirked. "When we have guests, there will be the usual entertainments. Cards, music, conversation. When we are alone, I generally retire to the library. You enjoy reading? Evangeline asked, genuinely curious. I do. For the first time, a real warmth entered his voice. The library is perhaps my favorite room in the house. My father collected extensively, and I've continued the tradition. I should like to see it, Evangeline said. I'm quite fond of reading myself. Alistair regarded her with new interest. What do you prefer to read? History, primarily, and poetry. She hesitated, then added, though I confess a weakness for novels as well, particularly Mrs. Radcliffe's. Gothic romances. Alistair looked faintly amused. I wouldn't have expected that. They're an escape, Evangeline admitted, from everyday concerns. We all need such escapes occasionally. He signaled for the footmen to remove their plates. Would you care to see the library now? It's not too forward of me to suggest. Not at all. I should like that very much. The library proved to be everything Evangeline could have dreamed. A vast, two-story room lined with thousands of volumes, with comfortable seating arranged near the fireplace and large windows that would flood the space with light during the day. It's magnificent, she breathed, running her fingers along the spines of the nearest books. I've never seen so many volumes in a private collection. Feel free to read anything that interests you, Alistair said, watching her with evident pleasure. They're as much yours now as mine. Evangeline turned to thank him, and found him standing closer than she'd realized. For a moment, neither spoke, and something electric seemed to pass between them, a sudden awareness that made her breath catch. Then, Alistair stepped back, the moment broken. It's growing late, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Perhaps we should retire. Of course, Evangeline folded her hands before her. Good night, Alistair. Good night, Evangeline. He hesitated, then added, I hope you will be happy here. As she made her way back to her chambers alone, Evangeline wondered if that were possible. Contentment, perhaps. Security, certainly. But happiness? That seemed a luxury not included in their arrangement. Yet, as she lay in her new bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Blackwood Manor settling around her, Evangeline found herself thinking of the way Alistair's eyes had softened when he spoke of books, the unexpected gentleness in his voice when he'd wished for her happiness. Perhaps, she thought, as sleep claimed her, there might be more to the Duke of Blackwood and to their marriage than she had initially believed. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm Evangeline had not anticipated. Each morning, after a light breakfast in her private sitting room, she would meet with Mrs. Wilson, the formidable housekeeper. Initially, Mrs. Wilson had been wary, her gaze assessing, but Evangeline's genuine interest in learning Blackwood Manor's intricate customs, coupled with her respectful inquiries about the staff's duties, gradually chipped away at the older woman's reserve. By the second week, Evangeline had explored every corner of the vast house, from the bustling kitchens to the quiet attics, introducing herself to each member of the household, learning their names and their roles. She meticulously reviewed the menus, the wine cellar inventory, the linen stores, and a dozen other aspects of running such a grand establishment. A quiet satisfaction bloomed within her. She was not merely a figurehead, but an active, competent mistress. Of Lord Alistair, Evangeline saw little during the days, as he was immersed in estate business. Their paths converged only in the evenings, when they would dine together in one of the smaller, more intimate dining rooms. Afterwards, they often retreated to the library, a cherished ritual. Here, surrounded by thousands of volumes, they would spend an hour or two reading in companionable silence, or occasionally engage in quiet discussions about a shared passage, or matters concerning the estate. It was a peaceful existence, though at times a solitary one. Evangeline wrote regular letters to her sisters and father, receiving enthusiastic responses about their newly elevated social positions as relatives of the Duchess of Blackwood. She tried not to notice the absence of any inquiry about her own happiness. On the 10th day after their return from London, Alistair informed her over breakfast that they would be receiving their first visitor. "My grandmother wishes to meet you," he said, looking somewhat apologetic. "She's invited us to tea at the Dower House this afternoon." Evangeline remembered his earlier warning. The Grand Duchess Augusta, she mused, the formidable one. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The very same. Augusta Blackwood, Grand Duchess of Blackwood. I feel I should warn you. She can be rather direct. Alistair hesitated, then, in a rare, unbidden gesture, reached across the table to briefly touch her hand. Just be yourself, he said, his voice softer than usual. She values authenticity above all else. Evangeline's heart fluttered at the unexpected contact, a small spark of tenderness in their formal world. The Dower House proved to be a charming Queen Anne residence, nestled amongst formal gardens at the edge of the lake that gave Blackwood Manor its name. As their carriage approached, Evangeline smoothed the pale green walking dress she had chosen, a nervous flutter in her stomach. "She won't bite," Alistair murmured beside her, a small attempt at humor. "At least, not immediately." Evangeline gave him a soft, reproachful look, but a tiny part of her was pleased by the unexpected levity. The Grand Duchess awaited them in a sunlit drawing room that offered spectacular views of the lake. At 73, Augusta Blackwood remained a striking figure. Her silver hair, elegantly styled in a fashion popular in her youth, framed a face dominated by sharp, assessing blue eyes, so like her grandson's. "So," she said after the briefest of greetings, her voice crisp, "you're the girl who has turned society on its ear by capturing my grandson. Do sit down and let me look at you properly." Evangeline felt rather like a specimen under examination. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Your Grace," Evangeline replied, taking the indicated seat. "Is it?" The old woman's mouth twitched. "We shall see about that. Alistair, pour the tea. Your grandfather always said a man should know how to serve as well as be served." To Evangeline's surprise, Alistair complied without protest, moving to the tea service with practiced ease. "Now then," the Grand Duchess continued, turning her piercing gaze back to Evangeline, "tell me about yourself, and spare me the usual platitudes about being honored to join the family and so forth. I want to know what sort of woman you are." Evangeline considered her response carefully, meeting Augusta's gaze steadily. "I'm practical," she said finally. "I value honesty and kindness above most other qualities. I enjoy reading and music, though I play only adequately. I believe in meeting one's obligations and keeping one's word." The Grand Duchess accepted her tea from Alistair. "And what made you accept my grandson's proposal? We both know it wasn't a love match. Your grandson offered me security for my family and a position where I might be of use. I accepted because it seemed a fair arrangement for us both." Honesty indeed. The Grand Duchess's eyes gleamed with something like approval. "And now that you've had a fortnight to assess your bargain, do you find it satisfactory?" Evangeline was acutely aware of Alistair watching her, a silent question in his gaze. "I find Blackwood Manor and its people welcoming. Your grandson has been considerate and generous. I have no complaints." "No complaints?" The Grand Duchess set down her cup with a decisive clink. A diplomatic answer. "Alistair, I believe I'd like to speak with your Duchess alone for a few moments. Perhaps you might admire the new roses my gardener has cultivated." Alistair looked as though he might protest, but after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "I'll return shortly," he said to Evangeline, his eyes conveying a silent apology. Once they were alone, the Grand Duchess's manner changed subtly. The intimidating Grand Dame softened into something more human, more vulnerable. "I was married at 19, she said, surprising Evangeline with this personal revelation, to a man I had met exactly twice. He was 20 years my senior and intimidating beyond words." "That must have been difficult," Evangeline said carefully. "It was terrifying," the old woman smiled faintly. "Yet we came to love each other deeply. Not at first. That came later, built day by day through small kindnesses and shared experiences." She leaned forward, suddenly intent. "My grandson is a complex man, Evangeline. He guards himself carefully, and with good reason. His childhood was not happy. And then, his first betrothal." Augusta's voice dropped. "Many speak of Lady Seraphina Sterling's supposed infidelity, but the truth is far darker. Seraphina was involved in a treasonous political plot. a dangerous scheme to destabilize the government. Alistair discovered it, and to protect the Blackwood name from scandal and association with treason, he had to break off the engagement abruptly. He allowed the rumors of her infidelity to circulate, for it spared Serafina from a worse fate, a public trial and potential execution, and shielded his family from political ruin. The scandal left him deeply scarred and wary of emotional attachments, leading him to seek a shield wife, a woman of unassailable character who would ask for nothing but what he offered. "I had suspected as much," Evangeline admitted, a pang of sympathy for Alistair, though he rarely speaks of personal matters. His father, my son, was a cold, demanding man who saw weakness in any display of emotion, and Alistair's mother, the Grand Duchess, sighed. Caroline was beautiful, but frail, both in body and spirit. She died when Alistair was 8, unable to withstand the demands of her position or her husband's neglect. Evangeline felt a profound sorrow for the boy Alistair had been. "I'm sorry." After her death, my son became even more rigid in his expectations. Alistair was sent to school far too young, denied the affection he craved, taught that duty must supersede all personal desires. The Grand Duchess's eyes grew distant with old pain. "I did what I could, but a grandmother's influence only extends so far. Why are you telling me this?" Evangeline asked gently. The old woman's gaze sharpened again. "Because you have an opportunity I lacked with my own son, to break the cycle, to help Alistair become more than the armor he wears, to show him that vulnerability need not equal weakness." Before Evangeline could respond, the door opened and Alistair returned. "I trust you've finished dismantling my character?" he asked dryly. "For today," his grandmother smiled innocently. "I was just telling Evangeline about my roses. Perhaps you might show her the gardens before you leave." As they strolled among the neatly tended flower beds a short time later, Evangeline found herself watching Alistair with new eyes, seeing beyond the reserved Duke to the wounded boy he had been. "She likes you," Alistair said, breaking into her thoughts, which is more than can be said for most people she meets. "I like her as well," Evangeline replied honestly. "She reminds me of you." Alistair looked startled. "Most people find us entirely different." "In manner, perhaps, but you share the same directness, the same clarity of purpose." She hesitated, then added, "and the same kindness hidden beneath a formidable exterior." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. For a long moment, Alistair studied her face as though seeing her for the first time. Then he offered his arm again. "We should return to the house. There's a chill in the air." That evening at dinner, something had shifted between them. Alistair seemed more present somehow, asking questions about her day, listening attentively to her responses. When she mentioned her desire to review the charitable works traditionally undertaken by the Blackwood Duchesses, he offered to have all relevant papers brought to her sitting room the following morning. "My mother established several initiatives in the nearby villages," he explained. "Schools, a small infirmary, apprenticeships for promising young people. After her death, my grandmother oversaw them, but they would benefit from your attention now." "I should like that very much," Evangeline said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Perhaps I might visit some of these establishments soon." "I could accompany you," Alistair offered, then immediately looked surprised at his own suggestion. "That is, if you would welcome the company." "I would," Evangeline replied softly. "Very much so." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. Later that afternoon, while Phillips, her lady's maid, was busy elsewhere in her chambers, Evangeline allowed herself a rare indulgence. She quietly retrieved a hidden sketch-pad and a small box of charcoals from a locked drawer in her writing desk. Her fingers, accustomed to managing ledgers and household inventories, now moved with a different, more fluid grace. She quickly sketched a scene from the Blackwood Manor gardens, the intricate patterns of a winter rosebush against the pale stone wall, capturing its essence with surprising skill. Her internal monologue reflected on how she had given up painting, her quiet passion, years ago. There had been no time, no money, no energy left after managing her father's chaotic affairs and sacrificing her inheritance. A quiet longing for her lost art, A part of herself she had believed forever buried stirred within her. She quickly tucked her supplies away as Phillips returned, the secret once more hidden. The weeks that followed brought a subtle but profound shift in the rhythm of Evangeline's life at Blackwood Manor. Alistair, true to his word, began including her in aspects of estate management, seeking her opinion on matters ranging from tenant disputes to the allocation of charitable funds. They rode out together to visit the nearby villages, where Evangeline was received warmly as the new Duchess, her gentle demeanor and genuine interest quickly winning over the villagers. At a small school in Thornfield Village, Evangeline knelt to speak with a shy little girl whose wide, earnest eyes reminded her so poignantly of her own childhood. When she glanced up, she found Alistair watching her from the back of the room, an expression in his gray eyes, something warm and appreciative, that made her heart skip a beat before it vanished the moment he realized she had noticed. In the evenings they still retired to the library, but now they often read passages aloud to each other, or engaged in spirited debates about literature and philosophy. Evangeline discovered that beneath his reserved exterior, Alistair possessed both a formidable intellect and a dry wit that increasingly revealed itself in her presence. One night, as rain lashed against the tall windows and a fire crackled merrily in the great hearth, Alistair closed his book and regarded her thoughtfully. "You're not what I expected," he said, his voice low. Evangeline raised an eyebrow, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "Is that a compliment or a complaint, Your Grace?" The corner of his mouth lifted in response. "Definitely a compliment. I thought we would be compatible. I didn't anticipate that I would enjoy your company so much." The simple admission, so honest and unexpected, warmed Evangeline more than the fire. "I feel the same," she confessed, her voice soft. "Our arrangement has proven more agreeable than I dared hope." "Arrangement?" Alistair repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it. Before Evangeline could respond, Harrington appeared at the door, his usual dignified composure slightly ruffled. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace," the butler said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "But her carriage has just arrived. Lady Seraphina Sterling requests accommodation for the night. She claims the weather has made travel unsafe." Alistair's expression closed immediately, all warmth vanishing from his features. His shoulders tensed, and he turned slightly, presenting his back to Evangeline. "Show her to the blue guest suite," he said tersely, his voice devoid of emotion. "Inform her we will receive her shortly." When Harrington had gone, Alistair remained by the fireplace, his posture stiff. "I apologize for this intrusion," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Seraphina has always been persistent." A cold knot formed in Evangeline's stomach. Lady Seraphina Sterling, the woman everyone had expected him to marry. Evangeline recalled the whispers at the Almack's assembly, the mention of her as the frontrunner. And Grand Duchess Augusta had implied Alistair had never truly courted anyone before. "Lady Seraphina was a friend of yours?" Evangeline asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We were briefly engaged 3 years ago," he replied, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. "The arrangement ended by mutual agreement." He turned, his expression unreadable, and took a step towards her, then stopped himself, his hand hovering. "Seraphina is complicated. It would be best if I spoke with her alone first." "Of course," Evangeline said, rising and smoothing her skirts, acutely aware of the distance Alistair had instinctively placed between them. "I shall retire for the evening." "Evangeline." He reached for her hand, then stopped himself, the gesture unfinished. "Thank you for understanding." But as she made her way to her chambers, Evangeline wasn't sure she understood at all. Augusta's words echoed in her mind. He never truly let her in. Yet Alistair himself had just confirmed a past engagement. The sudden appearance of his former fiancée, the beautiful widow whom everyone had once expected him to marry, seemed too coincidental. Was this all a facade? Had Alistair truly found joy with her, or was she, as Seraphina might imply, merely a safe, practical, undemanding choice? In the privacy of her chambers, after dismissing Phillips, Evangeline retrieved her hidden sketchpad and charcoals. She began a new sketch, channeling her unease and doubts about Seraphina's arrival into the swirling lines, the emerging shadows. Lady Seraphina Sterling proved every bit as beautiful as her reputation suggested. When Evangeline finally met her the following morning in the morning room, she was struck by the stark contrast between them. Vanessa's dark, dramatic beauty, accentuated by a gown of rich plum velvet, against Evangeline's own quieter appearance in a pale yellow day dress. Seraphina's confident elegance against her more reserved demeanor. Duchess. Seraphina's curtsy was technically perfect, but somehow still suggested she was doing Evangeline a favor. How kind of you to welcome me to Blackwood on such short notice. Not at all, Evangeline replied evenly, refusing to be drawn into a battle of courtesies. We could hardly turn away a traveler in such weather. Seraphina smiled, a practiced expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Alistair has always been so very gallant, one of his many admirable qualities. Indeed, Evangeline gestured to the breakfast laid out on the sideboard. Please help yourself. His Grace has been called to deal with an issue on the home farm, but he sends his apologies. How unfortunate, Seraphina murmured, selecting a piece of toast. Though it does give us an opportunity to become better acquainted. I've been simply dying to meet the woman who accomplished what so many failed to do, capturing the elusive Duke. Evangeline maintained her composure with effort. I assure you, there was no capturing involved. Our marriage was entered into with clear-eyed understanding on both sides. How refreshingly pragmatic. Seraphina's smile sharpened, though I confess myself surprised by Alistair's choice. He always professed to value passion above practicality. The implication hung in the air between them, as deliberate as a slap. Evangeline felt her cheeks warm, but refused to be baited. People often present different facets of themselves to different acquaintances, she said mildly. I'm sure you know His Grace in ways I do not, just as I know him in ways you cannot. Seraphina's eyes narrowed fractionally. How diplomatic. I can see why Alistair might value that quality in a companion. Before Evangeline could respond, the door opened and Alistair himself appeared, looking windblown and slightly damp from the lingering rain. Forgive me, he said, his eyes going to Evangeline first before acknowledging their guest. Seraphina, I trust you slept well. Tolerably. Seraphina rose gracefully, moving to kiss Alistair's cheek with familiar ease. Though I've missed our morning rides, perhaps later, when the weather clears, for old times' sake. Evangeline saw the flash of discomfort in Alistair's eyes, though his expression remained polite. I'm afraid I have commitments today, Seraphina, and your horses will need rest after yesterday's journey. Perhaps tomorrow would be better for travel. It was a dismissal, gracefully phrased but unmistakable. Seraphina's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, she said smoothly. I wouldn't dream of imposing any longer than necessary. Throughout the day, Evangeline found herself watching the interaction between Alistair and their guest with growing unease. Seraphina clearly knew Alistair well, referencing shared memories, using private jokes, touching his arm with casual intimacy. Alistair remained polite but distant. Yet, Evangeline couldn't help noticing how he unconsciously positioned himself, always keeping some distance between himself and his former fiancée. That evening they dined as a trio, the conversation flowing with artificial pleasantness. Seraphina dominated, regaling them with stories of her travels and mutual acquaintances in London, each anecdote somehow managing to emphasize her long connection to Alistair. Oh, but Alistair, do you remember that dreadful musical at the Hartleys? She asked, laughing melodiously. When you rescued me by claiming an urgent message had arrived? Vaguely, Alistair replied, his attention more on his wine than the conversation. He was always rescuing me, Seraphina continued, her gaze sliding to Evangeline. So chivalrous. Even when our engagement ended, he insisted on taking all the blame publicly. Wouldn't hear a word said against me, though many would say I deserved censure. Evangeline set down her fork carefully. That does sound like His Grace. Indeed. Seraphina leaned forward, her voice dropping confidentially. Though between us, the decision was entirely mutual. We simply realized we were too alike in some ways, too different in others. Passion without compatibility, you might say. Alistair's jaw tightened visibly. Perhaps we might discuss something else, Serafina. Of course, darling. Serafina patted his hand. I forget how you dislike speaking of the past. Later, as the women withdrew to the drawing room while Alistair remained briefly for his port, Serafina dropped all pretense of friendliness. He'll never love you, you know, she said, arranging herself gracefully on a settee. Alistair doesn't allow himself such vulnerabilities. Evangeline kept her expression neutral. I wasn't aware that I had solicited your opinion on my marriage, Lady Serafina. Consider it friendly advice. Serafina's smile was razor-sharp. I've known Alistair since we were children. I understand him in ways you never will. And yet, he married me. Evangeline pointed out quietly. Serafina's eyes flashed. For convenience, for respectability, for all the cold, practical reasons that have nothing to do with the heart. But when he needs passion, when he needs someone who truly knows him. She let the implication hang. Evangeline felt a surge of anger, quickly suppressed. I think you overestimate your importance in his life, Lady Serafina, and underestimate mine. Before Serafina could respond, Alistair rejoined them, his expression weary as he registered the tension in the room. I thought perhaps some music, he suggested, moving to the pianoforte. Evangeline plays quite beautifully. Does she? Serafina's tone suggested skepticism. How lovely. I should be delighted to hear her. Put on the spot, Evangeline had little choice but to comply. She took her place at the instrument and began to play a piece she knew well, a Beethoven sonata that required more emotion than technical brilliance. As she played, she lost herself in the music, forgetting her audience until the final notes faded away. The silence that followed was broken by Alistair's quiet voice. Beautiful, he said, with such sincerity that Evangeline felt her cheeks warm. Charming, Serafina added, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, though perhaps lacking the passion the composer intended. Now, Alistair, you simply must play that Mozart piece we used to practice together. The evening continued in this vein, with Serafina constantly maneuvering to emphasize her connection to Alistair, while subtly undermining Evangeline. Yet by the time they retired, Evangeline noticed that Alistair had positioned himself closer to her on the settee, his hand occasionally brushing hers in what seemed like deliberate reassurance. In the privacy of her chambers, as Phillips helped her prepare for bed, Evangeline found herself troubled by doubts she had thought vanquished. Had Alistair married her purely because she was the opposite of Serafina, safe, practical, undemanding? Was passion something he sought elsewhere, as Serafina had insinuated? The thought, cold and unsettling, curled in her stomach. She watched her reflection in the mirror, searching for something in her own eyes to refute the whispers, but saw only the quiet, dutiful woman she had always been. A soft knock at the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. Dismissing Phillips with a gentle wave, Evangeline wrapped her dressing gown more tightly around herself and called, "Enter!" Alistair appeared, still fully dressed, but with his cravat loosened, and his dark hair slightly disheveled, as though he had been running his hands through it in agitation. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble, his voice low and weary. Serafina's presence here is not coincidental. Evangeline steeled herself. I had suspected as much. Alistair began to pace the room, his gaze fixed on some unseen point. She wrote to me several weeks ago, expressing a desire to reconcile. I responded clearly that I was married and not interested in renewing our acquaintance. This impromptu visit is her way of ignoring my wishes. I see. Evangeline hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her since Augusta's vague hints. May I ask why your engagement ended? The true reason? Alistair stopped pacing, his expression suddenly pained, a raw vulnerability in his gray eyes. Serafina is not a faithful woman, Evangeline. During our engagement, I discovered she was involved in a treasonous political plot, a scheme to destabilize the government through illicit dealings with foreign agents. It was a grave betrayal, not only of me, but of her country and my family's name. Evangeline gasped softly. How terrible for you. It was illuminating, he said carefully, moving to the window, staring out at the moonlit landscape. I had believed myself in love with her. Her betrayal forced me to recognize that what I felt was infatuation, not love. That I had been seduced by her beauty and charm without truly knowing her character. To protect the Blackwood name from scandal and treasonous association, I had to end the engagement abruptly. Spreading rumors of infidelity was the only way to spare her from a worse fate and shield my family from political ruin. He turned back to her, his profile sharp against the night. After our engagement ended, I decided that marriage based on genuine respect and shared values would be preferable to one built on passion alone, to one that could once again lead to such devastating betrayal. "And then you found me," Evangeline said softly, the words an echo of her earlier doubts. Safe, practical, undemanding. Alistair's expression turned suddenly fierce. "Is that how you see yourself? How you believe I see you? Isn't it accurate?" She met his gaze steadily, though her heart had begun to pound. "You chose me because I was the opposite of Serafina." "I chose you," he said slowly, moving toward her, his voice deepening with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because when I looked at you, I saw strength, intelligence, integrity, everything Serafina lacks. You were and are everything I needed. And I never expected to find myself drawn to you in other ways as well." He stopped before her, close enough that Evangeline could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the unspoken promise in his eyes. Her heart began to race. "What ways?" Alistair's gaze softened, a hint of wonder in its depths. "The way you smile when something genuinely amuses you. The way you listen, truly listen, when others speak. The way you've made Blackwood Manor feel like a home again, not merely an estate to manage." His voice dropped lower, a rough tenderness in its tone. "The way I find myself thinking of you at odd moments throughout my day, wondering what you are doing, what you are creating." He took a step closer, and Evangeline scarcely dared breathe. "Evangeline, I don't wish to presume," he said quickly. "Our arrangement stands as agreed, but I wanted you to know that Serafina means nothing to me now, and that you—" He stopped, seeming to struggle for words, his eyes holding hers with an unwavering intensity. "What about me?" Evangeline whispered, her voice barely audible. Instead of answering, Alistair slowly, tentatively raised his hand to her cheek. His touch was feather-light, questioning. When she didn't pull away, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a brief, gentle kiss that ended almost before it began. "Good night, Evangeline," he murmured, stepping back. "I'll ensure Serafina departs tomorrow, regardless of the weather." After he had gone, Evangeline remained standing in the middle of her chamber, her fingertips touching her lips where his had been. Something had changed between them tonight, something fundamental and irrevocable. The quiet, practical walls she had built around her heart had been breached, not by force, but by a tenderness she hadn't anticipated. The question was, what came next? The morning after Lady Serafina's unexpected visit brought with it clear skies, washing away the lingering storm, and with it Serafina's departure. Her farewells, exchanged on the front steps of Blackwood Manor, were laced with a familiar, sweet venom. "Such a pity the weather kept me, but I shall cherish these memories, Alistair," she purred, her gaze flicking to Evangeline. As her carriage disappeared down the long driveway, Evangeline felt a profound sense of relief, though a lingering tension held her beside Alistair. He wrapped an arm loosely around her waist, drawing her closer. "She won't return uninvited," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. "I've made that clear." Evangeline nodded, unsure how to navigate the new, unspoken landscape that lay between them after last night's kiss. It had been brief, tentative, yet it had shifted everything. "I thought I might ride out to visit the school in Fernwood today," she said, her voice a little too bright. "The headmistress wrote, asking if I might present prizes at their midsummer recitation." "Would you like company?" Alistair asked, his tone carefully casual. Evangeline looked up at him, searching his face, and a soft flutter began in her chest. "Yes," she said simply, "I would." The day proved unexpectedly perfect. Warm sunshine, gentle breezes, and the Kent countryside at its most beautiful. As they rode side by side along winding country lanes, Evangeline found herself sharing stories of her childhood. A rare vulnerability. She spoke of her mother's early death, the sudden weight of responsibility that fell upon her, and her determined efforts to keep her sister's future secure, even at the cost of her own. "So you sacrificed much for them," Alistair observed as they passed through a particularly lovely stretch of woodland dappled with sunlight. "It was my duty," Evangeline replied automatically, a phrase she had uttered countless times over the years. "No," Alistair corrected gently, his gaze steady on the path ahead. "It was your choice. There's a difference." The simple words, spoken without judgment, struck Evangeline with the force of a revelation. She had never considered it that way. At the small school in Fernwood Village, Evangeline was touched by the children's obvious excitement and the headmistress's genuine appreciation for her interest. She knelt to speak with a shy little girl, no older than 7, who reminded her strikingly of her own quiet self at that age, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. When Evangeline glanced up, she found Alistair standing at the back of the room watching her. His expression was soft, something warm and appreciative in his gray eyes that made her heart skip a beat, a sensation both unfamiliar and intensely welcome. The warmth vanished the moment he realized she had noticed, but the impression lingered. On the ride home, a sudden summer shower caught them halfway to Blackwood Manor. Laughing, they spurred their horses, racing for the shelter of an ancient oak whose massive, spreading canopy offered some protection from the downpour. They dismounted quickly, huddling beneath the thick leaves as the rain lashed down around them, drumming against the foliage. "Your hair is coming down," Alistair said, reaching up to brush a damp tendril from her cheek. Evangeline was acutely aware of their isolation, the intimacy of the moment beneath the whispering leaves. His fingers lingered against her skin, sending an unexpected shiver through her. "It always does," she replied, her voice sounding breathless to her own ears. "My maid despairs of it. I like it this way." His eyes darkened, a silent question in their depths, wild, free. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibility. Evangeline found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by some invisible force. For a moment she thought he might kiss her again, and her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Instead, he straightened, his gaze flicking to the sky. "The rain is letting up. We should continue before it starts again." That evening, the strange tension between them persisted through dinner and into their usual time in the library. Evangeline found it difficult to concentrate on her book, acutely aware of Alistair's presence across from her, the memory of his lips against hers, the lingering touch on her cheek, hovering persistently in her thoughts. Finally, she closed her book with more force than intended, the soft thud echoing in the quiet room. "I think I shall retire early tonight," she said, rising abruptly. "Good night, Alistair." "Evangeline, wait." He stood as well, setting aside his own book. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner turmoil. "I feel I owe you an explanation for my behavior today." She paused, her heart racing. "What behavior?" "My inconsistency." He moved closer, his gaze troubled. "I find myself in unfamiliar territory. Our arrangement was meant to be straightforward, but my feelings have become complicated." "Mine as well," Evangeline admitted softly, the words a quiet confession. Alistair moved closer still, his expression intense. "I told you once that I didn't want passion in my marriage, that I preferred respect and compatibility. I remember." His voice dropped lower, filled with a raw vulnerability she had rarely heard. "I'm beginning to think I was wrong. Or rather, that I failed to recognize that respect and compatibility can themselves kindle a different kind of passion, one based on genuine knowledge of another person, not merely physical attraction or infatuation." Evangeline's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying, Alistair?" He reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth spiraling through her. "I'm saying that I want more than our original arrangement." He met her gaze, his gray eyes searching hers. "I want a real marriage, Evangeline, in every sense." because I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable, in a way she had never expected from him. And they terrified her. Evangeline felt tears spring to her eyes. "It terrifies me too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never thought to find love in this marriage. I didn't dare hope for it." Alistair lifted his free hand to her face, cradling her cheek with infinite tenderness. "I spent my life believing that love was a weakness, that duty and honor were all that mattered. You've shown me how wrong I was." This time, when he kissed her, there was nothing tentative about it. His lips claimed hers with a gentle passion that made her knees weaken and her heart soar. Evangeline wound her arms around his neck, drawing him closer, allowing herself to express the feelings she had been trying so hard to suppress. The kiss deepened, a melding of souls, a promise whispered without words. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alistair rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. Evangeline nodded, beyond words, and allowed him to lead her through the connecting door to his chambers. The final barrier between them fell away at last. Later, as moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver shadows across the room, and Alistair slept beside her, his arm draped protectively across her waist, Evangeline reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point, from a marriage of convenience to something deeper, richer, more profound than either had anticipated. She had entered this arrangement believing that love was not part of the bargain. Now, she couldn't imagine her life without it, without him. The unfamiliar sounds of Blackwood Manor settling around them no longer felt lonely but comforting, filled with the promise of a shared future. The weeks that followed settled into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Evangeline found herself blossoming under Alistair's affection, growing more confident in her role as Duchess. One afternoon, Alistair entered her private sitting room unexpectedly, finding her bent over a hidden sketchpad, charcoal smudging her fingertips. She quickly tried to conceal her work, a blush rising in her cheeks. "Evangeline?" Alistair's voice was gentle, curious. He stepped closer, taking the sketchpad from her. It was a swift, evocative drawing of the ancient oak, where they had sheltered from the rain, its massive branches rendered with a surprising skill. "This is magnificent. Why did you hide it?" Evangeline mumbled, embarrassed. I gave it up years ago when Mama died and Father's affairs required so much attention. There was no time, and the expenses." Alistair's gaze softened. "Your talent is undeniable. You should not neglect such a gift. Tell me, would you like a proper studio? And all the supplies you require?" A surge of joy, bright and unexpected, flooded through Evangeline. She looked at him, her heart full. I should like that very much, Alistair." He merely smiled, a genuine pleasure in his eyes. A few days later, emboldened by Alistair's unwavering support, Evangeline walked him to a neglected section of the Blackwood Manor grounds. It had once been a famed rose garden, but years of neglect had left it a tangled wilderness of thorny bushes and weeds. "This," she said, gesturing to the overgrown space, "could be magnificent again, a place of beauty, for all to enjoy. I should like to restore it." Alistair surveyed the wild expanse, then turned to her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "A new beginning, from a place that has been forgotten. I like that, Evangeline. Perhaps we could work on it together?" Evangeline's eyes widened. "Truly?" "Indeed." He summoned Mr. Finch, the head gardener, a man initially skeptical of a duchess's whims. But as Evangeline outlined her vision, and Alistair added his practical suggestions for drainage and new plantings, the old gardener's resistance melted into a grudging enthusiasm. The rose garden, once a symbol of neglect, would become their first tangible joint project, a living metaphor for the beautiful new life they were cultivating together. The weeks that followed saw Evangeline and Alistair often in the neglected rose garden, a landscape of tangled ambition and faded beauty that mirrored the Beaumont family's own history. Side by side they worked, their hands in the earth, clearing stubborn weeds and pruning thorny bushes. Alistair, usually so reserved in his movements, found a quiet satisfaction in the physical labor, and more profoundly, in Evangeline's steady presence beside him. Their conversations were quiet, murmurs about varieties of roses, the best placement for new saplings, or the surprising resilience of a particular bloom. More and more their hands would brush as they reached for a tool, or shared a moment of triumph over a particularly stubborn root. These lingering touches, initially accidental, became more frequent, more natural, a silent language of burgeoning intimacy amid the dirt and blossoms. One brisk afternoon, Alistair surprised Evangeline by leading her to a previously unused room in the east wing. He opened the door to reveal a beautifully prepared studio, bathed in the soft, north-facing light perfect for painting. An easel stood proudly in the center, flanked by a sturdy table laden with new brushes, vibrant pigments, and fresh canvases. Evangeline gasped, her eyes filling with unexpected tears. "Alistair," she breathed, overwhelmed with a gratitude that went beyond words. It's perfect." She ran her fingers over the smooth wood of the easel, a long dormant part of her soul stirring to life. He watched her, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips, genuinely pleased by her radiant joy and the sight of her artistic passion rekindled. Here, in this sunlit sanctuary, Evangeline began to paint with a vigor she hadn't known she still possessed, transforming blank canvases into vibrant reflections of Blackwood Manor's beauty and the surprising peace she had found within its walls. Summer's golden embrace began to fade into the rich hues of autumn. Evangeline, her heart lighter than it had been in years, found herself planning a harvest festival for the estate workers, a celebration of bounty and community. One morning, as she and Alistair broke their fast in the sun-drenched breakfast room, a letter arrived, brought by a footman on a silver tray. It bore her sister Felicity's familiar, flamboyant script. As Evangeline read, her smile faltered, and a subtle paleness spread across her cheeks. The letter spoke of Felicity and Lord Barton's desire to visit Blackwood Manor, to witness the changes in her life. But tucked amidst the effusive greetings and travel plans was a casual mention of gossip from London about mutual acquaintances, a phrase that caused a cold knot of premonition to tighten in Evangeline's stomach. Alistair, ever observant, noticed her sudden pallor. "What is it?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Evangeline's fingers tightened around the letter, the delicate paper crinkling. "It's from Felicity," she said slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "She and Lord Barton wish to visit us, but she also mentions Lady Seraphina Sterling has been telling everyone in London that our marriage is one of convenience only, that you still harbor feelings for her, and that I'm merely a placeholder until you can secure an annulment." Alistair's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "Ridiculous," he stated, his tone sharp. "No one would believe such nonsense." "Felicity says many do," Evangeline replied, her internal doubt a cold whisper against her newfound happiness. "Especially since we've been living quietly at Blackwood Manor, rather than taking our place in society." A direct threat, aimed not just at her position, but at the very foundation of the love they had so carefully cultivated. Without a word, Alistair rose and moved around the breakfast table, kneeling beside Evangeline's chair. He took her trembling hands in his gaze firm and reassuring. "Then we shall correct that misapprehension immediately," he vowed, his voice low and resolute. "First, by receiving your family with all honor. Then, by journeying to London for the little season, and finally, by showing everyone that our marriage is one of genuine affection and commitment." He lifted her knuckles to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss there. "Seraphina can spread whatever lies she wishes, Evangeline. The truth, our truth, will be evident to anyone with eyes to see." Evangeline's reassured smile was fragile, but real. The immediate dread began to recede, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they would face this new challenge. A few days later, Felicity and Lord Barton arrived. A flurry of trunks, valets, and ladies, maids, bringing with them the vibrant, often overwhelming energy and gossip of London. Felicity, pretty, vivacious, and dressed in the latest fashion from Paris, swept into the grand entrance hall of Blackwood Manor, embracing her sister warmly. "Evangeline, my dearest," she exclaimed, her eyes, however, casting an appraising, almost calculating glance over the magnificent hall. "Gracious, you've done well for yourself, haven't you? A duchess, though we hardly see you now. Too grand for your family, I suppose." The teasing note in her voice was unmistakable, laced with a subtle hint of her old, playful jealousy. "Don't be ridiculous, Felicity," Evangeline replied, linking arms with her sister, a gentle admonishment in her tone. "I've been learning my duties here, but I've missed you all terribly." Lord Barton, a genial man with impeccably fashioned side whiskers and an easy manner, shook Alistair's hand warmly. "Blackwood, good to see you again. London's dreadfully dull without you, you know." Alistair offered a small, polite smile. "I doubt that, Barton, but we plan to remedy our absence soon. Evangeline and I intend to open Blackwood House for the little season." Felicity clapped her hands together in delight, her earlier teasing forgotten in the thrill of the announcement. "Wonderful!" And just in time to quash those ridiculous rumors that horrid Caldwell woman has been spreading. Evangeline gave her sister a look of gentle warning. "Felicity," she admonished softly, "perhaps we might settle our guests before discussing London gossip." But the seeds of future battles had been sown, and the stage for their public affirmation was set. The first dinner with their guests proved pleasant enough, the conversation flowing easily between country matters and London society's latest tidbits. Yet throughout the meal, Evangeline was acutely conscious of Felicity's watchful eyes, measuring each interaction between her and Alistair, as if trying to discern the true nature of their relationship. After the gentlemen joined the ladies in the drawing room, Felicity deftly maneuvered to sit beside Evangeline, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well," she began, her gaze darting towards Alistair, who was engaged in conversation with Lord Barton. "Is it true what they say, Evangeline? That yours is a marriage of convenience only? The talk in town is quite insistent." Evangeline maintained her composure, though a flicker of annoyance stirred within her. The insidious whispers had followed them even here. "Of course not," Evangeline replied firmly, her voice quiet but resolute. "Alistair and I are very happy together." Felicity looked skeptical, her brow furrowing slightly. "He's so reserved, though. Not at all like Lord Barton, who wears his heart on his sleeve. Different men express affection differently," Evangeline said, a soft smile touching her lips as she glanced towards her husband. As if sensing her gaze, Alistair looked up across the room, his gray eyes meeting hers. A small, private smile, warm and reassuring, passed between them, a silent acknowledgment of their bond that made Evangeline's heart warm in return. Felicity, observing the exchange, paused. "Well," she said, a note of surprise in her voice, "perhaps there is something there after all." The shift, however slight, was a victory for Evangeline. The days that followed were filled with entertainments for their guests, riding expeditions, tours of the estate, musical evenings in the grand salon, and card parties that included some of the local gentry. Through it all, Evangeline was conscious of Felicity's watchful eyes, but now they seemed less critical, more genuinely curious. On the third evening, as the ladies withdrew after dinner, Felicity linked arms with Evangeline in the drawing-room, her expression unusually serious. "Evangeline," she began quietly, "I owe you an apology." "Whatever for?" Evangeline asked, surprised. "I believe some of the gossip," Felicity admitted, a flush rising in her cheeks. "But I've watched you together, and it's clear there's genuine affection between you and the Duke. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. It's rather beautiful, actually." Evangeline squeezed her sister's arm gratefully, a profound sense of relief washing over her. Felicity's newfound understanding was a balm to her heart. "Thank you for seeing the truth," Evangeline said softly. The evening at Blackwood Manor had begun pleasantly enough. The gentlemen had rejoined the ladies in the drawing-room, and the conversation flowed with a comfortable ease, a gentle hum of polite chatter and shared laughter. Evangeline, nestled beside Alistair on a plush settee, felt a quiet contentment settle over her, a warmth born of their new closeness and the easy camaraderie of their guests. Felicity and Lord Barton were engaged in a spirited debate with Alistair about the merits of country versus city life, their voices lively but good-natured. It was a picture of domestic harmony, one Evangeline had once thought unattainable. Then a soft knock at the door, and Harrington, the butler, appeared with a silver salver. "For you, Your Grace," he said, presenting a sealed letter to Alistair. Evangeline watched as Alistair broke the seal, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly as his eyes scanned the contents. The faint line of a frown deepened, and his posture, usually relaxed in her presence, grew rigid with a sudden tension. "Excuse me," he said, rising with an abruptness that caught the attention of the room. "Estate business requires my immediate attention." He offered no further explanation, merely a curt nod to his guests before departing, the door closing softly behind him. Evangeline's contentment evaporated, replaced by a prickle of unease. What could be so urgent, so pressing, that it demanded Alistair's presence away from his guests, away from her, and shattered the peace of their evening? She found herself distracted, her gaze lingering on the closed door, a premonition of disruption stirring within her. Half an hour later, the lingering scent of brandy and the hushed tones of their guests still echoed in the drawing-room, but Evangeline could no longer pretend interest. Making her excuses, she went in search of Alistair. She found him in his study, a room usually a sanctuary of quiet focus, but now charged with a palpable tension. He stood by the tall window, his back to the door, the letter crumpled tightly in his hand. His shoulders were set, rigid, a clear sign of his agitation. "Alistair," she said softly, approaching him, "is something wrong?" He turned, his expression grim, his gray eyes shadowed. "Seraphina is coming to Blackwood Manor," he said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled anger. Evangeline felt a familiar cold dread coil in her stomach. "What? Why?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration. "She claims she left some jewelry here during her last visit, a family heirloom, of great sentimental value." His mouth twisted in a humorless line. "It's a lie, of course, another excuse to insert herself into our lives." Evangeline's shock warred with a surge of protective instinct. Despite the unease, her resolve solidified. "We'll face her together," she said, placing a gentle, steady hand on his arm. Alistair's tense posture softened fractionally, and he covered her hand with his own, his grip firm. "I won't let her come between us, Evangeline. I promise you that." His words were a balm, but the shadow in his eyes remained. That night, Alistair's promise echoed in Evangeline's mind, a comforting anchor against the rising tide of her anxieties. Yet, as she lay in bed, the soft glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains, she found herself plagued by doubts she had thought vanquished. Seraphina's beauty, her sophistication, the shared history she had with Alistair, these were formidable weapons. Could Evangeline truly compete with a past so deeply entwined? She recalled Seraphina's parting words, a venomous whisper that clung to her memory. When he needs passion, when he needs someone who truly knows him. Was she merely a convenient solution, a practical duchess, while another woman held the key to Alistair's deeper desires? Alistair, sensing her quiet turmoil even in sleep, murmured, pulling her closer against him, his arm draped protectively across her waist. "You're thinking too loudly, my love," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Don't," he added, his voice thick with sleep. "What we have is real, Evangeline. Nothing she says or does can change that." Evangeline wanted desperately to believe him, to let his words banish the insidious whispers of doubt. Yet, a tiny, persistent knot of worry remained, a fear that Seraphina's calculated moves might indeed possess a power she still underestimated. Lady Seraphina Sterling arrived the following afternoon, perfectly timed to join them for tea. Her carriage, a vision of polished ebony and gilded trim, swept up the drive just as the tea tray was being brought into the morning room. Her surprise at finding additional guests, Felicity and Lord Barton, was poorly concealed beneath a veneer of practiced social grace. "Lady Barton," she purred, accepting a cup of Darjeeling from Evangeline, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How delightful to see you again, and in your sister's home, no less. How very cozy, isn't it?" Felicity, ever quick-witted, replied sweetly, "Oh, quite cozy, Lady Caldwell. Evangeline and Alistair have been the most wonderful hosts. Such a love match they've made of it. Don't you agree?" Seraphina's cup paused halfway to her lips, her gaze sliding pointedly to Alistair, who stood by the fireplace, his expression carefully neutral. "Indeed," she murmured, her tone dripping with insinuation. "How fortunate for all concerned." Throughout tea, Seraphina maintained a relentless stream of conversation, each anecdote and observation laced with subtle barbs. She spoke of London gossip, mutual acquaintances, and always, inevitably, circled back to a shared memory with Alistair, painting a picture of a past intimacy that subtly excluded Evangeline. Evangeline maintained her outward composure, but inside, she felt each comment like a needle prick. The verbal joust continued, Seraphina's stories weaving a tapestry of shared history designed to highlight Evangeline's status as a relative newcomer. "Oh, but Alistair!" Seraphina laughed melodiously, her hand lightly touching his arm as she recounted a tale. "Do you remember that dreadful house party at the Rutherfords? When we got caught in that thunderstorm and had to shelter in the gamekeeper's cottage? You were so gallant, giving me your coat even though you were soaked through yourself." Alistair's attention was more on his teacup than the conversation, his reply neutral. "Vaguely, Seraphina." Evangeline felt a familiar tightening in her stomach, but she met Seraphina's triumphant gaze with an even smile. "Alistair has always been considerate," she said calmly, her voice betraying none of the frustration she felt. "It's one of his finest qualities." Seraphina's smile sharpened, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Oh, yes, considerate to a fault, sometimes to his own detriment. Wouldn't you agree, Alistair?" Before he could answer, Felicity, who had been observing the exchange with growing indignation, intervened. "Lady Caldwell," she interjected smoothly, her voice sweet but firm, "I understand you've been quite active in London society this season. Lady Jersey mentioned you had become quite the fixture at Almack's. Do tell us, is it true you've taken up the art of fortune-telling?" The conversation, much to Evangeline's relief, turned, momentarily diverting Seraphina's relentless campaign. After tea, Alistair, with a barely perceptible sigh, excused himself to show Lord Barton the estate's famous trout stream, leaving the three women alone. Seraphina wasted no time dropping all pretense of pleasantness. "Now then," she said, arranging herself gracefully on the settee, her eyes sharp and cold, "let's speak plainly, shall we? Evangeline, you must know that Alistair and I share a connection that goes beyond mere history. We understand each other in a way that you, as a comparative stranger, simply cannot." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "He needs passion. He needs challenge. Things your sister, with all due respect, seems ill-equipped to provide." Before Evangeline could respond, Felicity interjected, her sweet voice now edged with steel. "I wonder, Lady Caldwell, if you understand him well enough to know how transparent your schemes appear to him. My sister and the Duke are deeply attached. Anyone with eyes can see it." Seraphina's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of pure anger in her eyes. "Attachment is not passion," she snapped, her voice rising slightly. "And Alistair needs passion. He needs a woman who truly knows him, not a quiet little mouse he married out of convenience." Evangeline had heard enough. "Lady Caldwell," Evangeline said, her voice quiet but firm, rising to her feet, her gaze unwavering. "You claim to have lost a piece of jewelry here. Let us look for it now, so that you may be on your way as soon as possible." Seraphina's smile returned, triumphant and brittle. "So eager to be rid of me, Duchess. I wonder why?" Felicity shot her a glare, but Evangeline merely inclined her head. The search for the non-existent jewelry proved as fruitless as Evangeline had expected. They moved through several rooms, Seraphina feigning a meticulous search, turning over cushions and peering into cabinets, while Evangeline and Felicity exchanged exasperated glances. It was a charade, an elaborate excuse for her presence, and Evangeline found a grim satisfaction in calling her bluff. Seraphina, despite her pretense of a thorough search, quickly tired of the game once it became clear no one was fooled. Her triumphant smile, however, remained, hinting at other tactics yet to be deployed. Throughout dinner that evening, Seraphina continued her relentless campaign of subtle undermining. She regaled them with anecdotes from London society, each one carefully chosen to highlight her long-standing connection to Alistair, referencing intimate moments and private jokes that excluded Evangeline entirely. "Oh, Sebastian, do you remember that dreadful masquerade ball at the Hartleys?" she asked, a reminiscent smile playing on her lips. "When you rescued me by claiming an urgent message had arrived, I thought I should simply perish from boredom." Alistair, to his credit, remained politely distant with Seraphina, his attention more on his wine than her stories. Yet he simultaneously showed small but clear signs of affection toward Evangeline, a quiet but potent counteroffensive. He would subtly touch her hand as he passed the dish, seek her opinion on a matter of estate management, or offer a private, reassuring smile across the table at one of her comments. These gestures, though unspoken, left no doubt in the minds of anyone truly observing where his heart lay. Even Felicity, watching their dynamic with keen interest, nodded approvingly when Alistair leaned slightly towards Evangeline to whisper a comment, a shared intimacy that visibly excluded their guest. Yet, despite Alistair's steadfast devotion, Evangeline couldn't entirely shake the seed of doubt Seraphina had so carefully planted. Seraphina departed the following morning as promised, her farewell brittle with barely concealed anger at her failed schemes. As her carriage disappeared down the long drive, Evangeline felt herself relax for the first time since the widow's arrival. Alistair wrapped an arm around her waist, a silent promise in his touch. "Let's go to London," he said, his voice firm. "Show society the truth of our marriage." Evangeline leaned into his embrace, a mix of anticipation and determination stirring within her. "I'd like that very much." London in November was a far cry from the pastoral peace of Blackwood Manor, but Evangeline found herself enjoying the change. Blackwood House, the Duke's magnificent town residence in Mayfair, had been opened and prepared for their arrival, its grand rooms gleaming with fresh polish and seasonal decorations. Their entrance into society caused precisely the stir Alistair had intended. When they appeared at Lady Hertford's musical evening, their first public engagement, the assembled company fell into a sudden, telling hush before erupting into whispers behind fans and hands. "They're all watching us," Evangeline murmured as Alistair led her through the crowd, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Let them watch," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "They'll see exactly what I want them to see, that I am devoted to my wife." Indeed, throughout the evening, Alistair remained attentively by Evangeline's side, introducing her to influential acquaintances, soliciting her opinion in conversations, his quiet pride in her evident to all who observed them. "Your Grace!" Lady Jersey approached them near the refreshment table, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "How delightful to see you in town again, and with your Duchess no less." "Lady Jersey," Alistair bowed slightly. "Yes, Evangeline and I felt it was time to enjoy the little season together." The influential patroness of Almack's turned her assessing gaze to Evangeline. "Duchess, you've caused quite the sensation by capturing Blackwood here. Half the eligible ladies in London were in despair when your marriage was announced." "I can hardly take credit for capturing His Grace," Evangeline replied with a serene smile. "We simply discovered we were well suited." "Indeed." Lady Jersey's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Lady Stirling has been telling a somewhat different tale." Alistair's expression hardened. "Has she? How tiresome of her to spread falsehoods." "So they are falsehoods?" Lady Jersey pressed, clearly savoring her role as society's premier gatherer of gossip. "Entirely," Alistair said firmly, taking Evangeline's hand in his. "My wife and I are exceedingly happy together. Any suggestion to the contrary is born of malice or wishful thinking." Lady Jersey studied them for a moment. noting their clasped hands and the genuine warmth in Alistair's eyes when he looked at Evangeline. "Well," she said finally, "I shall make a point of saying so to anyone who inquires. You make a handsome couple, I must say." As the influential matron moved away, Alistair squeezed Evangeline's hand gently. "One battle won," he murmured. "Of many to come, I suspect," Evangeline replied. She was proven correct at their next engagement 2 evenings later, a dinner at the home of the Earl and Countess of Harwick. Evangeline found herself seated beside a distinguished gentleman she recognized as Lord Pelham, a close friend of Alistair's from his university days. "I must say, Duchess, you're not at all what I expected," Lord Pelham commented as the first course was served. "Oh," Evangeline maintained her pleasant expression. "And what did you expect, my lord?" He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Well, given Alistair's history and preferences, I rather thought he'd choose someone more flamboyant." "I see." Evangeline took a small sip of wine. "Perhaps His Grace's preferences have evolved." "They would have to," Lord Pelham agreed, then immediately looked as though he regretted his candor. "Forgive me, that was impolite." "Not at all," Evangeline said calmly. "I appreciate honesty, Lord Pelham, and I understand that many find our match surprising, but I assure you His Grace and I suit each other remarkably well." From across the table, Alistair caught her eye and offered a small smile that conveyed both support and admiration. The exchange did not go unnoticed by others at the table. "You know," Lord Pelham said thoughtfully, "I believe you do. I've known Alistair since Oxford, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." By the end of the week, Evangeline had navigated a succession of similar encounters. Pointed questions, veiled insinuations, and curious scrutiny from Alistair's acquaintances and London society at large. Through it all, she maintained her composure, neither defending their marriage too vehemently, which might suggest insecurity, nor ignoring the rumors entirely. Alistair, for his part, made his devotion clear at every opportunity. He requested Evangeline play the pianoforte at musical gatherings, proudly introduced her to influential friends, and most tellingly, kept a polite but firm distance whenever Seraphina appeared at the same events. At last came the true test, Lady Ramsgate's ball, the most significant social event of the little season. Evangeline knew Seraphina would be present, and undoubtedly prepared to make one final public attempt to undermine their marriage. As Evangeline dressed for the evening, Alistair surprised her by entering her dressing room, dismissing her maid with a gentle wave. "I have something for you," he said, producing a velvet box from his pocket, "a gift to mark our first London season together." Inside lay a magnificent diamond and sapphire necklace, the stones arranged in an elegant pattern that complemented the Blackwood family tiara Evangeline would be wearing. "Alistair, it's beautiful," she breathed as he fastened it around her neck. "Not half so beautiful as the woman wearing it," he replied, his eyes warm as they met hers in the mirror. "I want everyone tonight to see what I see when I look at you. The most extraordinary woman in London, and the one who holds my heart completely." The declaration, so open and heartfelt, brought tears to Evangeline's eyes. "I love you," she said simply, "more than I ever thought possible." Alistair turned her gently to face him, his expression serious. "When I proposed our arrangement months ago, I could never have imagined how completely you would transform my life. I thought I was offering you security, Evangeline. Instead, you have given me joy." He kissed her then, a tender caress that conveyed all the emotions words could not express. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Evangeline felt a profound sense of peace. Their love was real, their hearts united. With this truth, she felt ready to face anything London society, or Seraphina Sterling, might throw at them. When they arrived at Lady Ramsgate's palatial townhouse, the ball was already in full swing. Their entrance caused the now familiar ripple of interest among the guests, but Evangeline found she no longer cared about the speculation. Let them whisper. She knew the truth of her marriage, and so did Alistair. They had scarcely completed their first dance together when Seraphina materialized before them, resplendent in a gown of deep crimson that displayed her assets to full advantage. "Your Grace," she purred, dipping into a perfect curtsy. "You look positively radiant tonight. Marriage clearly agrees with you." Her gaze slid to Alistair, a world of suggestion in her smile. "And you, Alistair, as handsome as ever. Quite like old times, seeing you across a ballroom." "Lady Stirling," Alistair acknowledged her coolly. "If you'll excuse us, I believe the next dance is about to begin." "Oh, but surely you can spare me one dance for old times' sake?" Seraphina laid a gloved hand on his arm, her voice dripping with calculated sweetness. "Unless the Duchess objects?" It was a calculated move. To refuse would make Evangeline appear jealous and insecure. To agree would give Seraphina private access to Alistair, however brief. "Not at all," Evangeline said smoothly, meeting Seraphina's gaze. "I'm sure His Grace would be delighted to stand up with an old friend. I shall take the opportunity to rest for a moment." Alistair shot her a questioning look, but Evangeline gave an almost imperceptible nod. She trusted him implicitly. As they moved onto the dance floor, Evangeline made her way to where the Grand Duchess Augusta sat, observing the proceedings with a keen eye. "Well played," Augusta commented as Evangeline joined her, "though I wouldn't have blamed you for refusing." "Alistair will handle her appropriately," Evangeline replied, watching as her husband maintained a polite but distinct formality with his former fiancée. "And this way, society sees that I have no reason to fear Seraphina's influence." Augusta's eyes gleamed with approval. "You've become quite the strategist, my dear." From across the room, Evangeline observed Seraphina's face grow increasingly frustrated as Alistair rebuffed whatever she was saying to him. When the dance concluded, he escorted her promptly back to her friends and returned immediately to Evangeline's side. "That was illuminating," he murmured, offering his arm to lead her toward the refreshment room. "Seraphina made it quite clear that she remains available should I tire of domestic tranquility, as she put it." "And your response?" Evangeline asked, though she already knew the answer. "I informed her that domestic tranquility with you contained more passion and joy than I ever experienced in her company." His eyes held a mischievous glint. "I don't believe she was pleased." Evangeline couldn't help laughing. "I imagine not." As they sipped champagne in a relatively quiet corner, Felicity and Lord Barton found them. Felicity looked triumphant. "Have you heard?" she asked eagerly. "Lady Jersey just publicly snubbed Lady Stirling, refused to acknowledge her at all. And she's told everyone that she considers your marriage a genuine love match, Evangeline. The tide of opinion has completely turned." "Has it indeed?" Alistair said mildly, though Evangeline could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "Absolutely," Lord Barton confirmed. "Even old Lord Pelham was singing your praises at the club yesterday. Said he'd never seen you so content." Alistair led Evangeline into the final waltz of the evening, the music swelling around them like a comforting embrace. A sense of profound peace settled over her, a quiet contentment that hummed beneath her skin. As they moved in perfect harmony across the polished floor, Evangeline thought of the quiet girl who had stood in the shadows of Almac's assembly rooms a year ago, never daring to dream of such a moment. "I never expected to be here," she murmured, her gaze meeting Alistair's, "dancing with my husband, wearing diamonds and sapphires, the envy of London society." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Regrets?" he asked softly, his eyes searching hers. "Not one," she assured him, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "Though I do miss Blackwood Manor, the peace there, the sense of home." As the final notes of the waltz faded, Alistair, defying convention, raised Evangeline's hand to his lips in full view of the assembly. The public declaration of his affection caused a ripple of whispers, quickly followed by approving smiles from those who had witnessed their journey. Across the room, Evangeline caught sight of Lady Seraphina Stirling. Seraphina's expression was a complex mixture of anger and something that might almost have been regret. For a moment their eyes met, and Evangeline felt a surprising flash of pity for the other woman. For all her beauty and accomplishments, Seraphina had never known the kind of love that now filled Evangeline's life, a love based on genuine respect, understanding, and shared values. With a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, Evangeline turned away. Seraphina belonged to the past, Her future, and Alistair's, lay elsewhere. Blackwood Manor welcomed them home with snow-draped grounds and wreaths of evergreen adorning its stately facade. As the carriage drew up before the entrance, Evangeline felt her heart lift at the sight. London had been a necessary battle, successfully fought and won. But this place, this sanctuary, was where she and Alistair had truly found each other. "Home at last," Alistair said, helping her down from the carriage, his gaze warm. "I've arranged a surprise for you." Evangeline smiled up at him, her curiosity piqued. "Have you? What sort of surprise?" He offered his arm, leading her not toward the main entrance, but around the side of the house toward the lake. As they rounded the corner, Evangeline gasped. The pathway to the lake had been lined with glowing lanterns, casting a warm golden light across the freshly fallen snow. At the lake's edge stood a small pavilion, similarly illuminated and decorated with winter greenery. "What is this?" she asked, delighted and bewildered, turning to Alistair. "The anniversary of our first meeting," he explained, guiding her along the path. "1 year ago today, I first saw you at Almack's, standing quietly in that alcove while your sisters danced." Evangeline stared at him in astonishment. "You remember the exact day?" "I remember everything about that night," he said softly, his gray eyes holding hers. "The lavender of your gown, the way you tried to prevent your father from approaching me, the moment our eyes first met." They reached the pavilion, where a small table had been set with a simple but elegant supper for two. A brazier provided warmth against the December chill, and a bottle of champagne waited in a silver bucket. Alistair handed her a glass, then raised his own. "To unexpected blessings." "To unexpected blessings," she echoed, touched beyond words. As they dined on delicacies prepared by Mrs. Chambers, Alistair seemed almost nervous, a quality so unusual in him that Evangeline couldn't help noticing. "Is something wrong?" she asked finally, placing her hand over his on the table. "Not wrong," he assured her quickly, his fingers tightening around hers. "But I do have something I wish to say to you, Evangeline. Something important." He took a deep breath. "When I proposed our marriage, I offered you a cold, practical arrangement, security for your family in exchange for your presence as my Duchess. It was a business transaction, nothing more." He shook his head gently. "I entered that arrangement, believing myself incapable of love, or perhaps unworthy of it. My father had taught me that emotion was weakness, that duty was all that mattered. I had accepted that as truth. But you, Evangeline, you changed everything with your quiet strength, your unwavering integrity, your gentle heart. You showed me that love isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength we possess." Alistair reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, velvet box. "I gave you my mother's ring when we became engaged, as tradition dictated. But now I want to give you this, chosen by me, for you alone." He opened the box to reveal an exquisite ring of sapphires and diamonds, reminiscent of the necklace he had given her in London, but uniquely beautiful. "I love you, Evangeline," Alistair said simply, his voice thick with emotion, "not out of duty or convenience or arrangement, but with every part of my being. Will you accept this ring as a symbol of that love, as a renewal of our vows, not as Duke and Duchess this time, but simply as Alistair and Evangeline?" Tears filled Evangeline's eyes as she extended her hand. "Yes," she whispered, "with all my heart. Yes." As he slid the ring onto her finger beside the Blackwood betrothal ring, Alistair's own eyes glistened with emotion. "I never expected to find such happiness," he admitted, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand. "To discover that the arrangement I proposed would lead to the greatest joy I've ever known." "Nor did I," Evangeline replied softly, her voice filled with tenderness. "I thought I was sacrificing my own happiness once more for my family's security. Instead, I found everything I never dared dream of." Alistair rose and drew her to her feet, leading her to the edge of the pavilion. The winter night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky, their light reflecting on the frozen surface of the lake. Blackwood Manor welcomed them home with snow-draped grounds and wreaths of evergreen adorning its stately facade. As the carriage drew up before the entrance, Evangeline felt her heart lift at the sight. London had been a necessary battle, successfully fought and won, but this was where she and Alistair had truly found each other, where their love had taken root and blossomed. "Home at last," Alistair said, helping her down from the carriage, his voice a warm rumble against the crisp winter air. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary before releasing it. "I've arranged a surprise for you." Evangeline smiled up at him, a shiver of delightful anticipation running through her. "Have you? What sort of surprise?" He offered his arm, guiding her not towards the main entrance, but around the side of the house, towards the lake, the crunch of snow under their boots the only sound. As they rounded the corner, Evangeline gasped. The pathway to the lake had been lined with glowing lanterns, casting a warm golden light across the pristine snow, illuminating their path as if by magic. At the lake's edge stood a small pavilion, similarly illuminated and decorated with winter greenery, twinkling softly in the starlight. "What is this?" she asked, delighted and utterly bewildered, turning to Alistair, her eyes wide with wonder. "The anniversary of our first meeting," Alistair explained, his gaze soft as he guided her along the path. "1 year ago today, I first saw you at Almack's, standing quietly in that alcove while your sisters danced." Evangeline stared at him in astonishment. "You remember the exact day?" "I remember everything about that night," he said softly. "The lavender of your gown, the way you tried to prevent your father from approaching me, the moment our eyes first met." They reached the pavilion, where a small table had been set with a simple but elegant supper for two. A brazier provided warmth against the December chill, and a bottle of champagne waited in a silver bucket. "Alistair, this is lovely," Evangeline said, her voice thick with emotion as he helped her remove her cloak. "But surely our wedding day would be the more traditional anniversary to celebrate." "We'll celebrate that too," he assured her, pouring champagne into 2 crystal glasses. "But this day marks the beginning of a journey neither of us anticipated, the moment fate or providence or simple good fortune brought us together." He handed her a glass, then raised his own. "2 unexpected blessings." "2 unexpected blessings," she echoed, touched beyond words. As they dined on delicacies prepared by Mrs. Chambers, Alistair seemed almost nervous, a quality so unusual in him that Evangeline couldn't help noticing. "Is something wrong?" she asked finally, her brow furrowing with concern. "Not wrong," he assured her quickly, reaching across the table to take her hand, his fingers tightened around hers. "But I do have something I wish to say to you, Evangeline, something important. When I proposed our marriage, I offered you a cold, practical arrangement, security for your family in exchange for your presence as my Duchess. It was a business transaction, nothing more." "Alistair," he shook his head gently. "Please, let me finish. I entered that arrangement believing myself incapable of love, or perhaps unworthy of it. My father had taught me that emotion was weakness, that duty was all that mattered. I had accepted that as truth." His fingers tightened around hers. "But you, Evangeline, you changed everything with your quiet strength, your unwavering integrity, your gentle heart. You showed me that love isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength we possess." Alistair reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I gave you my mother's ring when we became engaged, as tradition dictated. But now I want to give you this, chosen by me, for you alone." Inside lay an exquisite ring of sapphires and diamonds, reminiscent of the necklace he had given her in London, but uniquely beautiful. "I love you, Evangeline," Alistair said simply, not out of duty or convenience or arrangement, but with every part of my being. Will you accept this ring as a symbol of that love, as a renewal of our vows, not as Duke and Duchess this time, but simply as Alistair and Evangeline? Tears filled Evangeline's eyes as she extended her hand. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "With all my heart, yes." As he slid the ring onto her finger beside the Blackwood betrothal ring, Alistair's own eyes glistened with emotion. "I never expected to find such happiness," he admitted. to discover that the arrangement I proposed would lead to the greatest joy I've ever known." "Nor did I," Evangeline replied softly. "I thought I was sacrificing my own happiness once more for my family's security. Instead, I found everything I never dared dream of." Alistair rose and drew her to her feet, leading her to the edge of the pavilion. The winter night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky, their light reflecting on the frozen surface of the lake. "Look," he said, pointing toward the house. Every window of Blackwood Manor glowed with candlelight, transforming the great house into a beacon of warmth against the darkness. It was beautiful, magical, a perfect symbol of the light they had brought into each other's lives. "Our home," Evangeline murmured, "our future." "And what a future it will be," Alistair said, drawing her into his arms. "I have plans, you know, for the estate, for our charitable work, for our family someday." The mention of family brought a warm flush to Evangeline's cheeks. "About that," she said softly, "I have news of my own to share." Alistair's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Evangeline, are you saying—" She nodded, her smile radiant. "Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday before we left London. We will have an heir to Blackwood Manor by midsummer." For a moment, Alistair seemed unable to speak. Then, with a joy she had never before witnessed in him, he lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle, his laughter echoing across the frozen lake. "Careful," she protested, laughing with him. "Your heir might object to such treatment." He set her down gently, his hands moving to cradle her face. "You have made me the happiest of men," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My Evangeline, my heart, my unexpected Duchess." As his lips met hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and passion, Evangeline reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment, from a marriage of convenience to a union of souls, from strangers bound by arrangement to partners united by the deepest love. Snow began to fall gently around them, soft flakes catching in their hair and on their shoulders as they stood together beneath the winter sky. Behind them, Blackwood Manor glowed with welcome. Before them stretched a future filled with promise. Alistair had always believed himself immune to love. Evangeline had proven him completely wrong. And in that beautiful error lay their greatest blessing. Dear listener, in the quiet moments after our story ends, as Evangeline and Alistair stand beneath the winter sky with Blackwood Manor glowing behind them, I invite you to carry a piece of their journey with you. Like Evangeline, many of us have made sacrifices, putting others' needs before our own. We've accepted what seemed practical, rather than daring to hope for what our hearts truly desired. Yet her story reminds us that unexpected joy can find us at any stage of life, even when we believe our best years are behind us. Alistair's transformation teaches us that it's never too late to lower our defenses and open our hearts. The walls we build for protection can become our prisons, keeping out not just pain, but the very love and connection we secretly long for. His journey from a guarded duke to a loving husband is a testament to the courage it takes to embrace vulnerability and allow another to truly see and cherish you. Their journey from arrangement to deep affection mirrors what the wisest among us have always known, that lasting love grows not from fleeting passion alone, but from shared values, mutual respect, and the daily choice to see and appreciate one another. It is in the quiet moments, the shared responsibilities, and the unwavering support that the truest and most profound connections are forged, creating a bond that withstands any storm. As you rest tonight, may you find comfort in knowing that second chances exist, that new beginnings can arrive in unexpected packages, and that the heart's capacity for love does not diminish with age, but grows richer, deeper, and more discerning. May you be open to the surprising turns your own narrative might take, embracing the possibilities for connection and joy that you may not yet imagine. Like the warm lights of Blackwood Manor against the winter darkness, may you be surrounded by the glow of those who truly see your worth, and may you sleep peacefully, protected by the knowledge that genuine love, whether from family, friends, or a life partner, is a fortress that shelters us through life's harshest seasons. Remember Evangeline's quiet strength and Alistair's courage to change. Your own story continues to unfold, with possibilities for connection and joy that you may not yet imagine. Sleep well, dear friend. Tomorrow brings another page in your own beautiful narrative. With heartfelt appreciation, Royal Whispers team, thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, commenting, and sharing it with someone who needs a little hope and romance in their life today. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for supporting our channel. Your encouragement keeps us going and inspires us to keep creating more stories full of love, redemption, and unexpected turns of fate. Don't miss what comes next. At the end of this video, you'll see another suggested story from our channel. Prepare to be surprised by another emotional, unforgettable tale. With all our gratitude, the Legends of the Fall team. The crisp morning air of Blackwood Manor now carried a different melody, one of shared anticipation and quiet affection. Evangeline, now undeniably the Duchess of Blackwood, found her mornings transformed from solitary duty to cherished ritual. She and Alistair now broke their fast together in her sun-drenched sitting room, the clink of porcelain and the murmur of their voices replacing the hushed silence that had once defined her lonely meals. Over coffee and fresh fruit, they would discuss the day ahead, estate matters, calls from tenants, upcoming charitable initiatives. Alistair, once so reserved, would lean back in his chair, a rare, soft smile playing on his lips as Evangeline outlined her plans with a newfound confidence. Afterward, as the sun climbed higher, they would often stroll through the rose garden, a project that had blossomed alongside their love. The once neglected beds now burst with vibrant hues, a testament to their shared commitment. Evangeline would point out a newly unfurled bud, or a particularly fragrant bloom, and Alistair would listen intently, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Sometimes she would discover a cluster of wildflowers left on her pillow, gathered by Alistair during his early morning ride, a silent, thoughtful gesture that spoke volumes of his quiet observations and growing tenderness. These small domestic moments, once unimaginable, now formed the comforting bedrock of their days, reinforcing the established love that had taken root so unexpectedly. In the sunlit haven of her newly appointed art studio, Evangeline found a profound sense of liberation. The room, once unused, now hummed with the quiet energy of creation. Canvases, large and small, lined the walls, depicting sweeping landscapes of Blackwood Manor, the intricate beauty of the restored rose garden, and even a few tentative, expressive portraits of Alistair caught in unguarded moments. Her technique, once rudimentary and practiced in secret, had flourished under Alistair's unwavering encouragement and the sheer joy of unburdened expression. Each stroke of her brush, each blend of color, felt like a reclaiming of a part of herself she had long believed lost. She spent hours there, lost in the vibrant world she created, the scent of oils and turpentine, a comforting balm. The quiet longing that had once accompanied her art had been replaced by a fierce, undeniable joy. This was a self-fulfillment she hadn't known was possible, a testament not just to her rediscovered talent, but to the peace and confidence Alistair's love had instilled in her. No longer did she fear discovery or judgment. This was her space, her passion, openly embraced. It was a silent, powerful affirmation that her worth extended far beyond duty and sacrifice, that her spirit deserved to soar. Alistair's study, once a bastion of his singular authority, had become a space of collaborative thought and shared vision. Evangeline now sat across from him at the massive oak desk, not merely observing, but actively participating. He regularly sought her counsel on estate matters, valuing her practical insights and compassionate perspective in a way he had never thought to do with anyone before. Maps of the sprawling Blackwood lands lay spread between them, their heads bent together as they discussed plans for tenant improvements, sustainable farming practices, and the expansion of charitable initiatives in the nearby villages. Evangeline's keen mind, honed by years of managing her father's chaotic affairs, proved invaluable. She brought a fresh, empathetic approach to disputes and a clear-headed practicality to investments that balanced Alistair's sometimes rigid adherence to tradition. He had initially sought a discreet and dutiful wife. He had found an intellectual partner whose wisdom and heart enriched every aspect of his life and their shared commitment to the Blackwood legacy. Their discussions were often lively, always respectful, forging an intellectual intimacy that deepened their emotional bond, proving that their partnership extended far beyond the drawing room. The Grand Duchess Augusta, with her sharp wit and even sharper eyes, had become a regular, if still formidable, visitor to Blackwood Manor. During one of their customary tea visits at the Dower House, she observed Alistair and Evangeline with a knowing, almost approving gleam in her blue eyes. "See," Augusta said, her gaze fixed on Evangeline, "you've done what I hoped, my dear. You've broken through his walls." Alistair, seated beside Evangeline, offered a rare, quiet smile, a testament to his contentment. Evangeline, ever humble, gently corrected her. "He broke through his own walls, Augusta. I merely gave him reason to try." The Grand Duchess nodded slowly, a deep satisfaction settling on her features. "Perhaps so, but it takes a special kind of woman to inspire such a transformation." Her eyes, so like Alistair's, softened as she looked at them both. It was an unspoken benediction, a powerful validation from the one person whose opinion Alistair truly valued. Augusta had witnessed his long, solitary struggle, and now she saw his happiness, a joy she had once thought impossible for her guarded grandson. One evening, as the last embers in the library fireplace cast a warm, dancing glow across the leather-bound volumes, Alistair closed his book with a soft thud. Without a word, he reached across the space separating them and gently pulled Evangeline onto his lap. She settled against his chest, the familiar scent of sandalwood and old paper a comforting embrace. The world outside, with its societal demands and lingering shadows, faded into insignificance. They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the steady beat of Alistair's heart beneath her ear. Evangeline's hand found his, their fingers intertwining, a silent language of love and belonging. In this intimate stillness, she felt utterly safe, cherished, and undeniably loved, a stark, beautiful contrast to the loneliness that had once been her constant companion. The quiet magic of their connection, built brick by brick from respect, understanding, and shared moments, filled the grand library, making it not just a house, but a true home. The summer sun bathed Blackwood Manor in a golden light, particularly favoring the rose garden. What had once been a tangle of neglect was now a symphony of blooms, crimson, blush, and ivory petals unfurling in fragrant abundance. Evangeline and Alistair walked hand in hand along the gravel paths, the scent of roses thick in the air. Their project, a testament to shared effort and a blossoming love, stood as a vibrant symbol of their union. Mr. Finch, the head gardener, a man rarely given to effusive praise, stopped them near a particularly magnificent climbing rose. "Your Grace," he said, touching his cap. "It's magnificent. Never seen it so splendid. Your dedication, both of you. It's truly something." Alistair squeezed Evangeline's hand, a shared smile passing between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the beauty they had created, together. Not long after, Alistair arranged a small exhibition of Evangeline's paintings in a designated gallery room within Blackwood Manor. The canvases, vibrant with landscapes of the estate, portraits of beloved staff members, and studies of the newly restored garden transformed the space. Evangeline stood, a nervous but proud smile gracing her lips, as local gentry and family members mingled, admiring her work. Alistair remained steadfastly by her side, his hand often resting reassuringly at the small of her back. "May I present my talented wife, the Duchess of Blackwood," he would say, his voice imbued with a pride that warmed Evangeline to her core. His gaze, when it found hers, was a clear reflection of the love and admiration that had once been so carefully hidden. Felicity, vivacious and fashionable as ever, made her way through the admiring crowd, stopping before a particularly evocative painting of the Dower House at sunset. Her usual teasing smile softened into genuine wonder. "Evangeline," she murmured, turning to her sister, "your paintings are magnificent. I had no idea." She paused, then added, her voice quiet with sincerity, "You truly found your happiness here, haven't you? With your art, and with him." Evangeline squeezed her sister's arm, a surge of warmth and gratitude spreading through her. Felicity's words, so earnest and unburdened by past skepticism, solidified the newfound depth of their bond. It was a full circle, a quiet, heartfelt redemption. As summer gave way to the soft hues of late autumn, a new project began to take shape within Blackwood Manor, the preparation of a nursery. Evangeline and Alistair spent hours in the sunlit room, overseeing the delicate cream and green decorations, discussing names, and dreaming of the future. Alistair, usually so reserved, found his composure completely melting away when he spoke of their coming child. His fingers would trace the tiny embroidered patterns on a blanket, or he would press a tender kiss to Evangeline's temple, his eyes alight with a profound, unspoken joy. Evangeline often caught herself simply watching him, her heart overflowing with the tenderness he now displayed so freely. Grand Duchess Augusta, now a regular and cherished visitor, often joined Evangeline in the nursery. One afternoon, as Evangeline, visibly pregnant, rested on a cushioned window seat, Augusta held her hand. "You've brought such light back to this house, child," she said, her voice softer than usual. She spoke of Alistair's mother, Caroline, a frail but kind woman, and offered gentle advice for the coming months. Augusta's eyes, so like Alistair's, gleamed with deep satisfaction. "The cycle is broken," she murmured, "and true love flourishes." Evangeline felt a profound connection to the generations of Blackwood women who had lived and loved within these walls, realizing she was not just part of a legacy, but actively shaping its hopeful future. Midsummer arrived, painting the Blackwood estate in a riot of color and warmth. In the quiet sanctity of her bedchamber, with Alistair's hand clasped tightly in hers, Evangeline gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Alistair's face, etched first with concern, then profound relief, softened into an expression of pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at Evangeline, then at their son, tears glistening in his usually impassive gray eyes. "Our son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, as Dr. Morrison placed the tiny bundle in his arms. It was a moment of absolute triumph, the culmination of their love, a tangible symbol of their shared future. Later, as their son slept peacefully in a small cradle beside their bed, Evangeline and Alistair gazed at him, discussing names. They settled on Arthur, a strong traditional name from Alistair's lineage, combined with a middle name, Beaumont, to honor Evangeline's family. Alistair reached for Evangeline's hand, entwining their fingers. "Thank you, my love," he said, his voice husky. "For this family, for this future, for everything." His gaze, full of profound gratitude, held hers, a silent promise of enduring love. It was a name chosen not from duty but from the deepest affection, a perfect blend of their shared heritage and their unexpected love. A year later, the rose garden was more magnificent than ever, a living tapestry of their enduring love. Evangeline and Alistair walked through it, hand in hand, their toddler son Arthur, toddling ahead, chasing butterflies. Evangeline, now a confident duchess and a celebrated artist, laughed freely as Alistair scooped up their son. They reflected on their journey, the challenges faced in London, the restoration of the garden, the success of their charitable works, and the profound, unexpected joy of their family. This place, Blackwood Manor, was truly their home, vibrant and full of life, a testament to a love that had blossomed from duty into destiny. Dear listener, in the quiet moments after our story ends, as Evangeline and Alistair stand beneath the summer sky with Blackwood Manor glowing behind them, I invite you to carry a piece of their journey with you. Like Evangeline, many of us have made sacrifices, putting others' needs before our own. We've accepted what seemed practical, rather than daring to hope for what our hearts truly desired. Yet her story reminds us that unexpected joy can find us at any stage of life, even when we believe our best years are behind us. Alistair's transformation teaches us that it's never too late to lower our defenses and open our hearts. The walls we build for protection can become our prisons, keeping out not just pain, but the very love and connection we secretly long for. Their journey from arrangement to deep affection mirrors what the wisest among us have always known: that lasting love grows not from fleeting passion alone, but from shared values, mutual respect, and the daily choice to see and appreciate one another. As you rest tonight, may you find comfort in knowing that second chances exist, that new beginnings can arrive in unexpected packages, that the heart's capacity for love does not diminish with age, but grows richer, deeper, and more discerning. Like the warm lights of Blackwood Manor against the evening darkness, may you be surrounded by the glow of those who truly see your worth. And may you sleep peacefully, protected by the knowledge that genuine love, whether from family, friends, or a life partner, is a fortress that shelters us through life's harshest seasons. Remember Evangeline's quiet strength and Alistair's courage to change. Your own story continues to unfold with possibilities for connection and joy that you may not yet imagine. Sleep well, dear friend. Tomorrow brings another page in your own beautiful narrative. With heartfelt appreciation, Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, commenting, and sharing it with someone who needs a little hope and romance in their life today. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for supporting our channel. Your encouragement keeps us going and inspires us to keep creating more stories full of love, redemption, and unexpected turns of fate. Don't miss what comes next. At the end of this video, you'll see another suggested story from our channel. Prepare to be surprised by another emotional, unforgettable tale. With all our gratitude, the Legends of the Fall Team.